Good morning, salam, namaste, sat sri akal, everyone. ISH Talk series is about life lessons to succeed in life. Hear it from renowned personalities from all walks of life who share their life journey, their experiences, and more importantly, insights with all of you. And as always, please do not hesitate to comment, leave a feedback, watch it, and give us your blessings. Thank you so much, everyone. We have such amazing guests with us today. He is an avid golfer, she is a philanthropist. He has been chairman and managing director of several companies, and she had led finance in several companies. An absolute pleasure to welcome Gagan and Amar. I've known you for some time, and it's always a pleasure. In the first segment, Amar, we'll start with you. Talk to us about your early years. I think if you remember when you were 4 or 5, where were you born? What really happened? What kind of education? Talk to me about your family.
So, my parents came from Pakistan, what is now Pakistan. They were in Rawalpindi, and my father came across with virtually nothing with him. And he brought half his village with him across the border and took refuge in the court of the Maharaja of Faridkot.
Mm-hmm.
And we were housed in his private estate in Delhi, which was then known as Faridkot House. He gave us an outhouse where we lived, and next to us were his entire service providers, the laundry people and the others and the guards and all of those. And then he had his private estate next to ours in this huge sprawling complex, which was then Lytton Road and now is Copernicus Mark. That's where I started my life. And my father was an insurance agent with Prudential in those days. That's what he had started after he came to India, with just one check of some 600 rupees in his pocket, and that's what he had. My mom was always a housewife, and we were a joint family. I had 3 of my father's brothers staying with us, and his sister and his mother. So I was in a kind of a joint family, and from there emerged my persona, so to speak, and the internecine issues that such families have, especially when they have lost a lot in life.
True.
But the one great thing that my father did was to put me into a good school. And he put me in, I was admitted in Delhi Public School. And I lived 3 worlds in those days. One was the world, this world. Then there was the world across the road, which the Sangli senior officers mess, where all the brigadiers and generals used to live. And behind the house were the dhobis and the guards, and who lived in single room apartments or rooms with their families.
Of Bharat in India.
And then there was the Maharaja and his family with his Scottish tents and his pipe bands and his evening soirees and his parties. I was a favorite of his, incidentally. And so he would call me when he would have parties, and I sat down with him and seen the plump and the pageantry.
And how old were you at this time?
I was just 5, 6, 7. Yeah. And then, so I had, the initial challenges in life were to belong, right? You had to know how to play marbles and spin a top. If you had to be anything with that gang, you had to learn how to conduct yourself in an army senior officer's mess if you were going across the road to General Bevour's place. In those days, he was Major General, and play with his kids, or General Satarawala. And then you had to also visit the the royal household where the Maharani would call me over and you would be in this place. And this home where there were uncles and aunts and squabbling.
And which part of this? So in you at that point in time, you had some of all these parts, or you inclined towards a particular part?
And I think that's where the issue was, that one became a very a person who wanted to belong to various social strata, and therefore one became quite flexible in terms of how one would conduct oneself. So one had to quickly acquire the skill to survive in these places.
And were you at ease with
I was at ease, but it was very clear that one had to excel in everything. You had to excel in playing marbles. You had to excel at dancing and
dancing
singing
with the Maharajas.
No, and of course being there, and when the dance used to take place in the officers' mess, you were around with the kids, and they knew, and so you had to adjust to that. And of course, there was life in school, Delhi Public School itself.
And I'm assuming this is the 50s era.
Yeah, I'm 51 born. So I mean, and school itself, which was a challenge again with a set of boys and girls who you coexisted with. And I was a mediocre student. I was not, again, therefore you had to excel in a few things. So I think the initial need to belong triggered a need to be good at certain things. Because if you weren't, then you would probably be excluded.
And when you say you were a mediocre student, can you elaborate on that? What exactly you mean?
I mean, I wasn't...
so academically you were not, but life skills, you had all the skill.
Yeah, one would play all the sports and one would do all those things. But I would stand 12th or 13th in a class of 35.
So this would take you to perhaps somewhere closer to the 60s. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll just pause you there. Gagan, at the same time, you were in Bombay, right? And he was in Delhi, right? Your early memories, your early childhood, because Bombay was different, right? Bombay, even at that point in time, I come from the 70s generation from Bombay, was the city of dreams. People came in from all over to embrace that city. How was it for you in the 50s era?
Well, it started very well, and I always thank Bombay for who I am today. I am the youngest of 4 siblings, so my oldest sister is 13 years older than me. So I just grew up because I was, just like
a couple of mothers.
Yes, absolutely. So childhood was great. I went to a good school. My father had moved from Rawalpindi before partition, so there was none of the partition trauma. In fact, he helped people who had moved, and he used to import watches from Switzerland and sell them in India and other stuff, and he was doing very well. In fact, my oldest sister even learned flying in 1960. So that was the level of, luxury or comfort that we had. But then he made the strategic mistake of deciding to manufacture watches in India. And that was while smuggling was still happening, and it was a very different time. And it failed. And that's when family fortunes really crashed. Yeah. So, and I remember I was in the 5th standard or something at that time. And since then, I've been an accountant, because even at that age, I used to be making my father's balance sheet to see whether we would be able to survive. And it wasn't that bad, but one passed through school and one went to college. But I knew I had to be independent, because I didn't want to, especially when I passed out of school, I didn't want to depend on...
And it's so amazing at that point in time. And I only reflect on the 80s to make a point in the 50s and the 60s, where the women participation in Bombay was prevalent across.
Yes.
Yeah,
they could be at the stock exchange, or they could be a designer, even in the 50s and the 60s, right? Air India came in from there, a lot of glamour, Bollywood was still around, right? But Delhi, I'm assuming, Amar, was a little conservative at that, right? In terms of women participation.
It was a boys' country.
It was a boys'
Clearly,
country.
yeah, it was a boys' country. And my sister's 7 years younger to me. I was quite a lonely child till I was 7, and so this was a kind of on-demand situation. I said, I need a sibling. And I could see that, and the way she was brought up and the way she grew up in North India was very different from the way I grew up. And so it is true.
But education for you, I'm assuming even at that point in time, was paramount for all the
Yeah,
siblings.
Absolutely. Education was, and we were, my father did have a resistance to girls, daughters of the house working. But since I was the youngest, my older sister fought that battle. And
Right.
so it was okay for me. But both my sisters did home science. I was the only one who decided to take on commerce.
But that was also prevalent at that time, home
Yes.
science
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
things like
And they
that.
were
Yeah.
they did exceptionally
Situations
well.
were different. Yeah.
I decided to go into commerce, and because in my head I wanted to get.
And did you break that stereotype? Because I remember in the 70s, there was a certain community perhaps who would get into trading and commerce in Bombay. I grew up in a Gujarati neighborhood, right? The conversations in the Gujarati neighborhood was either the stock exchange,
Yes.
right, or commerce, and I would say the intellect, right, who perhaps just wanted to do only commerce, would get into cost accountancy and chartered accountancy, right? It was a certain sect.
So I didn't have any grand plan. I decided to do commerce because it was a choice between arts. I felt is not for the smart people,
and it was more home science at that point in time.
And I wanted to do something which would equip me for more options. So I chose, and I didn't want to get into science because I thought that's going to be a long studying thing with becoming a doctor or an engineer. So I really took the lazy option.
But were you good in your studies?
That's the whole thing. I joined commerce as the best option without realizing, but that was my takeoff point because I had a professor who taught us accountancy. He was a chartered accountant. He asked me to work with him. He forced me into signing articles, and I got more and more lured into.
And was still the finance hub, right? At that point in time, and when you maneuvered yourself, Amar, from school, let's say, into college, and you are a chartered accountant, was it a prevalent profession over here in the north?
Mine is a crazy story.
Yours is a crazy story. Love to hear that.
It's a crazy story of what I swore I would not do ever again. It was the influence of Sangli senior officers mess across the road and looking at the life of these generals and senior army officers, and I had two uncles in the army by then, meant that I had to go to the armed forces. And I did, and I went, I stood for I took the NDA exam. I did extremely well in that exam. And there I was, having done my school, waiting in the month of June, July, with a letter in my hand, admission to the National Defence Academy. And there was my father and mother and grandmother and everybody crying around the place, suffering from what I then realized was only sonitis. Only sonitis is when you have just one son and you suffer
and
from.
And the backdrop, of course, was the war which had happened.
All of that. So, and then, there was so much of influence put on me that I had to actually I had to actually decline joining NDA, and I was extremely upset about that. And I was sent into Sri Ram College of Commerce to do commerce, and I didn't know the front end of commerce. And I drifted in because of strong family influence. And my father was a very strong man in that sense, in many senses. So, and I moved into commerce, and from commerce I moved into chartered accountancy. Honestly, I drifted into it because they wouldn't let me do what I really wanted to do.
But both the chartered accountancy, as I say, I was so intimidated by it in the 80s, right? Because the doctor and the chartered accountants at that point in time were pretty much pegged at the same level. And I say, I don't think so. I've got the competency to even kind of do that. So, in hindsight, obviously, it looks like a drift, but there is solid rigor behind that drift.
It is. I mean, on hindsight, yes, the fact that was the second phase of my life, and when I completed my chartered accountancy, that has been the bedrock. Because later on in life, I realized how much that meant in terms of understanding numbers and figures. How even people who had done their MBAs and others were not so prevalent and were not so good at it, and how that particular aspect of the knowledge that we had was a plus going forward.
And especially with you, Gagan, again, you were breaking multiple stereotypes.
Yeah.
A, commerce, B, chartered accountancy. I'm assuming, and just an assumption, largely a male dominated kind of a profession, right?
Oh, yes, and more so when you came to Delhi. I got married and completed my CA in Delhi. And that was a shock for me. No one was willing to give me a job. I was a cost accountant and a chartered accountant, but no one was willing to give a woman a job. In Bombay, it would have been different, but it was traumatic. And by the time I landed my first job, which was with Ranbaxy, I was willing to work for free. It was so traumatic.
But they were still kind of professional. But again, Delhi and the North had the Lala culture, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And obviously, I don't blame.
No, but even in Ranbaxy, I was the first lady that ever joined the accounts department. The first woman. And I was ignored for a while. Eventually, I made such good friends with the guys that they are still
I
friends.
know so many people, but I can safely tell you, Gagan, that when you're talking about that 50s era and chartered accountancy, I think you would be in that the female participation in the workforce, and then chartered accountant. I think you would be in the top 3 or 4 people only.
It was 70s.
At that point
so
in
50,
time.
It was 70s. So Bombay.
Bombay was different.
In the exam hall in Bombay, when I did my CA,
You had about
there
20,
would be
25,
about 15%, 15
No,
to
Bombay was
20%
different.
women.
Yeah.
In Delhi, it was absolutely the opposite. I was possibly the only woman in the hall at that
So
time.
you joined Ranbaxy. Let's pick up your story.
Yeah,
What
so-
happened after your chartered?
So, when I finished, I think I was pretty clear that I could not have worked for business houses in that sense, because the way I saw it when I did my chartered accountancy, and I did it in a medium level company, which meant that I had far more experience at the nitty gritty level, which again is a bedrock of things to come, because right through my even during my commerce days and others, my focus always used to be to understand the subject that we were dealing with in greater depth than was required to pass the exam. So same thing here, that with chartered accountancy, I studied, I could see the businesses that I was auditing, and I said, this is not where I belong in terms of what practices they follow and what they do. So I decided to actually take the first entrepreneurial risk, and that was to set up my own practice. And I had a cycle, and which later on with much difficulty moved into a motorcycle. And I had 400 rupees that my mother had given me, and another 2,000 rupees that a friend of mine had lent me to make my library, and that's how I started on a Barsati as a chartered accountant.
And do you think the rigor that you applied in chartered accountancy, it is rigorous, continues to be, that rigor, and of course you understood capital, you understood finance, you understood, I would say, the back of the business.
Yes.
Right? Somewhere you were de-risking yourself because you understood the back of the business, right? If I understand capital, right, then all I need to do is apply a certain set of competence in front of the business.
Yes, but the issue was, where do you get the opportunity?
Where you get the opportunity.
And how do you sustain yourself? So this fierce need within me to be independent. I wanted to be on my own, and I was staying with my parents, and I had to, because there was no way I could have survived on it.
If I just pause you there, this need to be independent, did you see a sliver of that characteristics when you were growing up? Again, those 4 segments that you were...
It was, as I told you, it was a reaction in terms of the fact that when you are pushed into things because of certain influences that are around you, you need to then want to do things on your own. And I think my father would have loved the fact that if I had joined one of these companies and become a chartered, a finance officer, whereas I went into a practice with just a little bit of money. But then that's how it was. And in fact, later on in life, that's always been the bedrock.
I'm just trying to see, you're literally, you came from 2 different worlds.
Yeah.
Right? Bombay and Delhi at that time were 2 different worlds. You confluenced somewhere in Delhi. You started off preliminary with this entrepreneurship. Now you are in Ranbaxy. There is a culture difference for you happening, coming in from Bombay into Delhi. Now take what happened after Ranbaxy. How was your stint with Ranbaxy? As a person, I'm not talking about a job, what really happened?
Well, rewinding a bit, I've always needed to keep busy, and I've always wanted to add value. So, right from my childhood, whether it was being the president of the Leo Club or even during my articles, I taught in 2 schools, earned enough to support myself and do my CA. So, I've always been independent and uh, needed to move ahead. I never dreamt of becoming a CEO or any such thing. I didn't have any such tall designs, but I wanted to keep on adding value. Ranbaxy was a great experience. I didn't get promoted when I thought I deserved it, so I quit and I took another job. And then we moved to Nepal, which was a totally different scenario, and the kids came.
And we will talk about Nepal.
Yeah.
But to your point, you said you were president of the Leo Club, and even when you were doing your articleship, you would teach. So there was that element of, I would say, more responsibility you had taken upon yourself.
Absolutely.
So there was that early character was always there.
Yes, from the start.
From the very beginning.
And my appetite for understanding business. All my holidays, vacations, and weekends, I would accompany my dad. So I knew how to fill a bin card, stock in, stock out, everything when I was in middle school. Because I used to go and understand exactly what was happening.
And I'm assuming now both of you in your 20s?
Yes.
Right? At some time
Not
when you
now,
were,
but then.
right? At that time you were in your 20s.
25,
How did you meet?
28.
How did you meet?
Our families knew each other.
Ah.
And both of us were interested in theatre. So I used to do theatre, and even, this is the other thing, that I, in spite of all those things, but they weren't kept a width in life. I used to still do some theatre. I would play sports, and I would do, whatever chartered accountancy and other stuff that one had to do. And she is actually much more accomplished in theatre than I was. She worked with IPTA and others in Bombay.
Wow.
And so through the family circles, it got to be known that there are these two CAs, or one doing CA and the other one. Yeah. And then they're both interested in theatre and all, and so we met. And then we decided to come together and
When
marry.
was this?
It's 1978.
Is he right?
1977.
77,
I knew it. That's okay.
Yeah. It took me 6 months.
All of us do that. There's no problem.
I'm within range.
And after some time, we used to all.
No, it's 78. So, and so that was it. I'd qualified in 1975 as a chartered accountant, and 77, 78 we got married. So that was it.
And that was in Delhi?
78 was the marriage. He's right
That's
about that.
right.
We met in
We
77.
met in 77.
So he
Yeah,
hasn't
so-
said it wrong when he said
It's
78.
1978.
I apologize for myself. Because I always get it wrong.
So that's when we got married, and then she completed her chartered accountancy after that.
And this was in Delhi.
Yeah, this was it.
In his firm. I finished my articles in his
my
firm.
By the time
By
you were
then-
already an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so actually I merged my practice with a larger practice.
Wow.
And by then I had started, and again, that whole thing about wanting to specialize and excel. I had started creating a completely new technology of internal auditing within the field of audit. And one had worked hard on it, and I think one was becoming pretty good at it, but I didn't know how to make money. And so I joined a larger practice, and I brought this experimental technology with me into it, and it prospered there because that was the atmosphere. And that particular, which included audit of the hospitality industry.
So, Amar, what I'm kind of picking up, as much as you said that there were these 4 segments you were influenced in, there was this school, but there was this something about you. You wanted to do something much, much more. Did you believe at that point in time that, my purpose, I'm not talking spiritually or anything, is much more than perhaps what I'm seeing around?
Yeah, there is this urge, and I think maybe whether you call it an entrepreneurial quality or not, but there's this urge that in whatever you do, try and create something which is afresh, anew, or a much required variant of what prevails. And look for the gaps in whatever profession that you're following. And I saw that this was a gap. It was right there, that people were not doing this, and it was required to be done.
Yeah.
It was a new form of internal audit and operations appraisal.
I'm just kind of saying, India was so different at that point in time.
Yeah.
And here you are thinking something even at that point in time, in my opinion, way ahead of your time. At that point in time, what were your peers doing? Because obviously DPS schoolmates were there, the others were there. Did they follow, did you see a pattern that most of them perhaps went the traditional route, and
Yeah,
only
yeah, so-
few perhaps took that inherent risk. Did you see that
Some
pattern?
did. You see, we had business families that went into business. That was, they were successors to their fathers and their. Then some went into the IAS, and then there was this IIT thing that people went into, and then went. So these 2-3 segments, IAS, IFS, IIT. IIT, IIM a little later, but in those days it was always the IIT that took the limelight, and then and these areas, and CS, we just, I think my entire class, I was probably one or two of us who went into the commerce side of things.
And again, the civil services,
They were
continues
very,
to be prevailing a very north tradition, right? Because
that was very prominent.
growing up, again, I didn't know nobody. I don't know a single friend
that
who
was
went
very,
into an IFS or an IS or the services,
At least 15-20% of my classmates all went into IAS.
Yeah. I think
and IFS.
the polity emanates from Delhi, the services comes from north of India. A lot of armed forces also prevalent in the northern states.
Yeah, so actually, eventually one formed a completely different circle of associates and friends and colleagues when one went into CA and beyond CA.
Yeah.
And that fraternity was completely different from what my school was. And into that, one again went into another circle, and one had to again get one's place there. And again, one pursued, some form of excellence and differentiation to be able to be there, belong there, and be recognized there.
I need to come back to you, right? Here you are, a professional lady, breaking the stereotype. Of course, like everyone else, man and woman gets married. Then you have babies. Again, what I have observed, I won't say I have done deep research. I'm only talking about life experiences more than anything else. Ambitious ladies, because of the need to balance the household, sometimes need to step back. Obviously, birth children, nurture them, and 5, 7, 8 years, 10 years, right? If they have a couple of babies. Did you go through that aspect yourself as well? While he was, of course, kind of practicing and having your own business?
Yeah, we moved to Nepal when our firstborn was just 6 months old. But I always say that I saw my firstborn's face and I lost all ambition. I was very happy to be just a mother, and actually he kicked me back to work because he couldn't understand how I could be just sitting at home and looking after a woman. And if I called him and said I'm having lunch with a friend, he actually made it sound like what a waste of time. And we went to Nepal, and I gradually got back. And I loved it, of course. Gradually got lured back into working first part-time.
And again, in Nepal, I'm assuming participation of the women in the workforce was negligible.
Very.
Right? Except for maybe agriculture, maybe the family-owned businesses.
Though in the group where we worked, which was the leading group of Nepal, the chief accountant was a woman. And a very strong woman.
Very strong woman.
Not a chartered accountant, but a
She
woman.
was very strong.
And who commanded a lot of
How was that experience of Nepal? I think
so I mean, again, the question was that, it's important in life that you take a call, and these calls that one took of, getting into practice, the next call was that, okay, this practice is not going to get me, especially the moment Grishma, elder one, was born, said this is not going to get me where we want to get us where we want to get. And so Nepal had by then become one of my clients, the royal family. And we talked, and they realized that it was much better if we then moved lock, stock and barrel. And my parents were very unhappy about it. Again, the whole story was that I said, no, now, these are decisions that I'm going to take. And we are going to take together, that we are moving. And my father was extremely upset and all of that. But this time round, it wasn't not joining the army and all of that, because the transition had taken place, the independence had happened. I had moved out of my parents' house much against their will. So all those, and this ability, I think looking back, is very important, that you have to look forward and say, okay, is this working? if this is not working, can we then move to the next? There's going to be some pain in the exercise. There's going to be some people who are going to be upset. But then you have to see what is good for the career, for the family, and move and take that risk. And so Nepal was a risk. We moved to Nepal, completely different country, somewhat different culture, and we established ourselves there. And there, both of us started. I mean, she started to work again, and I slowly grew in that group to become the president over the next 14 years.
And so the first child was 6 months. You moved, and the second child was
born
I'm
there.
assuming in Nepal, right?
Was born there. Yeah, was born there.
And they did their early years schooling, their
Yes.
early years of education in Nepal. How was that experience?
Great. We were there for 13 plus years, and it was like we were working in a laboratory. Everything was small scale, but the experiences were extremely valuable. So we learned a lot. We missed the boom, the IT boom in India, and we came back and we realized that we had been left far behind. But the experience, the learning.
By the time you came back, it was the 90s.
Yes, it was
1996. 95, 96, I came back.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
So we missed that. So, there was a price to pay. But the experience we had in Nepal was absolutely...
And you were always with finance and accounts.
No, I had also moved. He moved to general management before me. But by the time we left, I had also moved to general management.
Oh, you had also
I
moved
was
to-
running one of the group companies, and I used to handle projects and stuff like that, and handle the management accounting, etc.
12 years. Let's deep dive into that. You became the president of that group, right?
Yeah.
And you would have joined at a certain level.
I joined as the head of finance.
As the head of finance, right? Because of the background. And finance is binary. at the
That's
end
what
of
they
the day.
needed, actually.
Yeah. And
I was there
leading a
internally.
group is people management. It's all about culture. It's about human emotions, right? They always say again, unsubstantiated research, but more likelihood of a business development, sales, marketing person becoming a CEO than, let's say, a finance guy becoming a CEO. So here you're breaking another mold.
Yeah. So and to break that mold, I had to really work at myself and on myself, because I realized that I was a finance guy. My perspective was finance, and if I had to move on, then I had to. And it's very critical that this is what I reflect on life. That is very important that one invests in oneself. If one is not going to invest in oneself by acquiring skills, by working at certain things that you don't have and you need to have to strengthen your overall persona, right? It's not you're not going to get somewhere. So the question is to invest in yourself.
Amar, for the younger audience, elaborate a little bit more when you say
When I say, for example, I'm finance, right? So I need to now, I see that if I have to become the president of this group, I need to acquire the skills that you just spoke about, how to have a width of knowledge and understanding that goes beyond finance. So I went for my senior executive program to London Business School. I went back and studied strategy at a short course at Stanford. I did all these things and these were transformational, because when I came back from London Business School, I had a fresh set of thinking in my head. And that is where you formed certain philosophies on business, which were away from finance, but you had a philosophy of running business. That's where I started to become a people's person. I started to experiment with how we can bring people on the front page, and what is the core of your thinking, and what is your philosophy of business.
What I'm trying to also kind of unpeel over here, Amar, is here you were head of finance and you had a clear vision for yourself, for the family, right? That I want to be here and I will do what it takes. And if it means I need to step aside to look at myself, if I need business development skills, how do I gain that? If I require sales, how do I gain that, right? I need to take ownership of now making decisions, especially from a business side, and seeing it through, and those highs and lows. Goes back to that early childhood of yours in terms of seeing things through. I'm trying to see that pattern in you, that if you take it up, right, you want to see it through. You knew what you wanted. Sometimes it takes 5 years, sometimes it takes 12 years. That's besides the point. but you knew what you wanted and you went in.
But I would just say that it wasn't always as clear as that, as you express it so well. There was an element of drift in it.
Of course.
One has to accept that. I mean, there was an element of fate, fortune, whatever you may say, opportunity that came your way. And that helped to get one a little ahead. And I had the fortune of having some very good mentors in life. I had people who mentored me in Nepal in those days, taught me how to conduct business. Mr. A.N. Haksar, Mr. Srivastav, a few others who taught me. And they had the big-heartedness to coach me. And I learned a lot from them because they were the captains of industry and commerce, and they showed me the pathway. And my own boss, Prabhakar Rana, who was an amazing man. I mean, the amount I learned from him. So it meant acquiring skills like, dress sense, acquiring skills like, how to conduct yourself in these circles. Apart from the fact of how do you manage, and I had my own theories about people, which they accepted. And so that it was a confluence of a lot of things. But all of it was to invest in oneself, to make oneself worthy and capable to handle the challenges that one wanted.
You were also growing with the organization, and you reached your pinnacle also in the Swalti group, right?
Yeah, I was heading the funds and planning.
And the funds and the plan. Now tell me something. Here, both of you are driven by aspiration. You had of course, the responsibility of the children. Not to say the father doesn't, right? We all do. Everyone nurtures a family together, right? But there is the mother who really steps up for that additional responsibility. And when you drift, as you rightly said, I'm trying to get into this family dynamics. How important is it? Because when you come back home, now you have shed all your inhibitions, right? If there is fear there, you don't show it at the office space, but you reflect back at home. How did the dynamics between you two work? That support system, right? I'm not saying you shed a tear or you shed a tear, but there are days where you're anxious, you don't know what's really happening and you're frustrated, anxiety, and you throw tantrums towards yourself. How did that work?
Yeah, I think on reflection, Gagan is the more balanced of the two of us in terms of balancing emotion and experience. To that extent, I find that I am more emotional. I am more affected by, or maybe I demonstrate it more than she does. She's able to take a lot and internalize it and be more rational about it than I am. And perhaps that's a feeling that I have, that I tend to get upset with people and the way they behave, and if they are not doing the things that so. But she was a great balancing factor in terms of.
And she would nudge you back.
It often said constantly. In that sense, whereas I was a person who, if I may say so, was in a vicarious kind of way committed to her professional career and to make sure that never got compromised more than it possibly needed to. She would balance the issues that I was facing, knowing fully well my vulnerabilities in terms of where I was good and where I was not. And the funny stories about this, I mean, the fact that I was the president of the company and she was the financial controller, straightforward clash of interest, right? And right through the company, there was this whole, and my boss, Mr. Rana, I went to him and I said, sir, this is the situation and what do we do? So he said, okay, hang on, let's just ask everyone what they feel about it. And the unanimous vote was, no, she's the one person who can keep this guy straight.
Absolutely.
So keep her as a financial. So there you go.
How did that come about? You are that iron lady definition. No, seriously. I'm telling you why. Again, you look back at the education, breaking stereotypes, coming into in northern, very patriarchal kind of a society. I can tell you in 1990s, there was hardly any women participation in the north of India, right? I can only assume in the 70s and the 80s, it would have been literally negligible, right? And of course, having children, rising up in your professional life to the level that you kind of rose, and then handling his emotions as well while he was kind of growing. How do you guys manage it?
That's what makes a woman.
I think one is, to his credit, he takes feedback very well. And I don't mince my words. I'm pretty bad at that. So if I see something wrong happening, I call it out. Or something that doesn't seem right to me, I'm very open about it. But while all this was going on, I was constantly in a learning mode. I didn't go to any
Business
places
school.
to study. My learning has all come on the job and from mentorship. In fact, he was possibly the first mentor I had, because he was ahead of me in terms of the profession, etc. He got the job there and I joined. So to that extent, it was, those 13 years we worked was a very good partnership. But strangely, we can't work together now. We've moved so differently in our careers.
Yeah, I think it has its own era.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Why not?
it's also to coexist, working in the same organization, you have to be able to take feedback and be able to talk about things objectively. And I won't pretend, it's not as if we stopped talking about work when we came home.
Yeah.
It was discussed. I think the children were as much part of the conversations, and they did their MBA through that, just listening. So it's not as if we shut shop and we didn't talk about.
So by the time you came back in 1996, children may have been in their teens.
One was in middle school and one was
One
just
was
getting
in-
into high
this is
school.
Into high school, right? And you
Yeah.
came back to Delhi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let's take it
Yeah,
forward.
so again,
from-
again, there was a milestone in the sense that we realized that, hey, hang on a minute, this is utopia, and around us there was a lot of social change taking place. Nepal was going through a revolution, which we had predicted incidentally would happen, and one could see that succession was taking place. I could sense that this was not a place, and both of us sensed it, that this was not a place where one can now last out for too long. Secondly, the children's education.
True.
We felt that yes, they were in the American school and all of that, the British school, but but we felt that no, this needs to change, because now we need to reposition ourselves and get into the next phase where honestly, not only our careers matter, but the children's education matter, and what we saw. And as luck would have it, through a good friend of mine, I landed my first job with a multinational, which was with Coca-Cola, and I came back here. And she came back here and sacrificed her career.
And incidentally, Coca-Cola did a re-entry into India
That had already
after
happened.
1991.
No,
right?
that had already happened.
But it must have happened around 92.
91, 92, and 96 I joined them
Yeah.
here. And I joined as head of business development, and I came in as an Indian expatriate back into India in 1996 with two kids who were then admitted to the American International School. And so that objective, in terms of making sure that my children and our children got the education that they deserved, and because, again, going back, the best thing my father did for me
was to invest in that education, no matter what.
No matter what. He used to spend 25% of his earnings in those days on my school fees and everything else. Well, yeah, about approximately 20%. So it was the same thing. So and she actually came back here with no job, and honestly, that was a different culture. That was the Rajwada, which one had worked towards corporatizing, and that was what one was doing there. And I came back here to join a multinational, which was a completely different culture, and that culture shock was really, really something that hit me like a sock in the solar plexus. It was something that I later on in life I reflect upon a great learning.
And the leadership would have been mostly European and Americans here.
Not only that, the whole culture was so different. With all due respect and being very blunt and honest about it, it was so multinational, at times so toxic in terms of what it was. And there it was. So I talk about this, and I in fact lecture on this subject, but which I have done one here too. It was a complete shock because of the fact that essentially we were sitting as an execution sort of
whatever you call it,
of somebody else's thinking. And whereas in Nepal the situation was that
we had all the brain power to not only strategize, but to execute as well.
So whereas over there you figured out the what and the how, here you were possibly just the how. and there was this whole
Don't
dynamics.
think, execute.
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
and the dynamics of, if you know, the expatriates there, and then the Indian way of working, and the clash of the cultures was an amazing, on reflection, an amazing study which actually strengthened my belief of people on the front page, which was a philosophy that had actually formed in Nepal, which I had slightly experimented with there. But when I came back here, it only reinforced the fact that this perhaps, or some of these things, were not the way to conduct yourself in a country which is a developing setup.
And also, I think the Indian populace, right, that time, even today, right, we are driven by emotions.
Yes.
So if you just apply transactional management to a human-driven management, it will never work here.
You're absolutely right. I think we couldn't have expressed it better. That to understand Indian culture, one of the things that happens here is that multinationals find it very difficult to understand Indian culture because they don't again invest in it. It's very critical that we understand, and this is where I say that our MBAs and whatever we do, and if we have our eye on who's going to be listening to this, but I would say this to the young people, that you can do all the MBAs you want and you can do all the study from Western, but you have to ground it in the realities of where you're going to practice it.
Absolutely.
And if there is one place where you can really learn a lot, it is practicing those concepts when being grounded in India and its diversity, and in understanding that here, perhaps more than anywhere else, people are the most important part of your business.
Absolutely.
Okay. And if you have to get the skill and the ability to be able to handle the people who work with you, and not with a tone of the manner and form in which some cultures abroad tend to work with them. And luckily, I think overall, later on in life, which we can talk about, this has been successful. And therefore, it gives me great confidence to say it.
Even somewhere in the 2000s, right, I had this opportunity to lead this company. And we were based out of Maharashtra. And there was a lot of conversations happening with, I would say, the BMC, the municipal corporation. And a lot of people, and obviously coming from Bombay, you are affluent in Marathi as a second language, right? And what I observed was, if I would interact with them in the language they understood, they would embrace me even more. They would understand me more. They wouldn't think I'm an alien to them, and they would go out of their way, right? That's the Indian culture, at least in business, that I thought, that speak in the local dialect. So whether you are in Tamil Nadu, speak in Tamil, right? Because at the end of the day, the local dialect is part of their identity, right? There's no point speaking in English with them, or not that they don't understand English. They speak absolutely fluent Hindi and English. But the fact is, if you are a Maharashtrian, you speak Marathi. If you're a Karnataka, you speak Kannadiga, right? Or you're Tamil, you speak Tamilian. And take pride in that. I say that often in education as the biggest problem. And I said this in many forums, is education should not be in English in India. The primary years of education should be in the language which the family and the child understands. Now, if you take a Rai Bareli, or if you go down to a Chikmagalur, or you go down there and you say, you know what, let's just force English. It's not going to happen, because the child understands the native mother language. He will absorb much more and gradually bring him into English. So what really happens? English intimidates them. They fall out, right? And they never come back into the mainstream. And it's a proven fact the world over.
It's not,
teach in the native language.
Yeah, but it's not just the language. It is the question of our understanding how the culture works.
Of course.
It is these aspects. For example, I'll just give a quick example. Age is a very important thing in our culture.
Yeah.
Right. A person who's elder to us is the subject of a lot of respect and regard.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult for us.
Yeah.
Even today, for us to have and seniority and
the so-called linear hierarchy.
We are a hierarchical society, right? Fathers, and then and the same thing we practice in our organizations, where senior people are people who are elder to you generally, right? And the first time in my life, I'm saying that Coke taught me a lot of things. The first time in my life in Coca-Cola, I got promoted, and the guy who was reporting to me was older than me. Was something so uncomfortable that I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And
that dynamic is also
and
very
for
different.
them, it was just something that
Yeah.
was fine. It's okay. So, culturally, we are very different, and therefore we need to be conscious of these things, not to compromise best practices, but on the other hand, enrich your experience. So, as I said, the people aspect of operating here was perhaps the next discovery or the next whatever invention or the next platform, which I then moved on to research and work in.
But tell me something, with the Coca-Cola at that point in time, business development, you would have been, again, to literally all the parts of India, right?
Yeah.
The Bharat, the India,
Whole of
A,
it.
B, C, D,
All
E.
of it.
What was that you observed now as a consumer behavior about Bharat and India at that point in time?
Yeah,
Which
so
perhaps sitting in Delhi or Bombay, we didn't understand that.
yeah, the issue was, for example, it was very clear to me, or became clear to me as I worked, and which I think many people disagreed with me at that time. I thought that the game was clearly distribution, and it had nothing to do with the fancy marketing that was going on.
Totally agree.
Okay, so the question was, and to take the great Roberto Goezzeta's words, who was the chairman of Coca-Cola at one time, and he said, you have to be within arm's reach of desire.
Absolutely.
And I said, if that is what it is, make it available and make it cold, it will sell.
Yes.
Okay, so the question was that you don't need, in this country, the impulse to do certain things and the word of mouth, and we have to watch out for that, because that's a very major form of communication here.
Yes.
Which, word of mouth, what the village thinks about you, what they think about your factories. I'll give you a quick example. If they think that you have sucked out the groundwater, which by setting up a Coca-Cola factory that uses 4 times the amount of water that it actually puts into a bottle, they will not like your brand.
You're so right. You're so right.
If you can convince them, and so therefore, what are we talking about? We are talking about convincing communities that we are actually doing a good job here by way of generating employment, generating education, and therefore the importance of integrating with the communities around and not just setting up a plant and thinking, okay, this is what it is.
But did they think at that point in time?
Yeah, so I mean, this is what the thinking
This
that
is
we
where the Indian senior managers, leaders.
And this is where we had to literally convince them about the fact that yes, if you can't do that, if you cannot do that, and if that is too long drawn out, then get into an industrial area.
Correct.
And that's what we did. We made sure that our production plants and other things were located in certain areas where we did not infiltrate and create a kind of negative feeling. And the brand, and this is the philosophy that came back, if a brand wants to prosper in this country, it has to solve, and this is what news for all the entrepreneurs who want to come out and do their startups. Please focus on solving some of the problems of the communities in which you exist.
Absolutely.
For if you don't, then we have missed a huge opportunity of generating prosperity. So this is very critical.
Yeah. And incidentally, even from an education standpoint, you say when you build a college, when you build a university, and in our case, let's say it's hospitality and culinary, it's about the community separate. Have you built a community around this? That ecosystem needs to support this. At the end of the day, if it is culinary, in the 50-kilometer radius, do homemakers have an option to kind of come over here and upgrade their skills so that they give back to their community as home chefs, right? Or are local producers, can we source, let's say, herbs from them? Can we source masalas from them, right? And this can become the mandi for them, right? Because here, when you have more than 600, 700 students at any given point in time, right? See the amount of consumption that we are kind of doing. And that is, I would say, literally a fiduciary responsibility.
It is.
Of a university and a college.
No,
don't exist.
It is the responsibility of every entrepreneur.
Yes. Oh, so right. Absolutely right.
That if you ask me today, that people are, the fundamental purpose of business in our country, and in any country, I mean, I worked a lot in Sri Lanka, which is the final phase of Bombay. it has to be that we must solve the problems of the community in which we are and create prosperity there. Whether you are exporting that, whether you are selling it locally, is a secondary consideration.
I hope all the private equity and venture capitalists
This is very critical.
are hearing this podcast, and this is something they also need to keep in mind.
No, because the system has failed the communities, because of the traditional system of saying that businesses are businesses, they pay taxes go to the government then solves the problems of the community, and the community prospers. This has failed. It has failed because 100 rupees that start from here lands up at 1 rupee at the other end because the all gets lost. So the important thing is now, cut that out. Let the businesses go straight to the communities and resolve their problems. The effectiveness is that going to be 90% as opposed to 1%. So, and that becomes not just a flavor of the month, it is the responsibility of every entrepreneur.
So right. And before this podcast, we were speaking about labelers. You know, I think the government, right? The government, I think they've removed most of the barriers. The problem is in us.
Is in us. We expect the government to do too many things.
Absolutely. The problem is in us. I totally.
We expect the government to, and in fact, we have abrogated our responsibilities as business because we are thinking that that is something the government will handle. No, it's not. And this is again something where I say that I say that we have to evolve our own Indian system of managing back to that whole thing, the village. Where are you? You have an external responsibility in everything that you do in your conduct. You are not just an institution by yourself.
So it's an impact. Unless there is that rupee spent does not make an impact.
Because we are a community-oriented culture.
Yes, so right, absolutely right.
We are not normative in our thing. We are a community. Everything about us is community.
And did that change the paradigm in Coca-Cola? This kind of thing?
I couldn't. Honestly, beyond a point, I couldn't. And that is why I left.
All right.
I left to move on to Diageo, where I then became the managing director of Diageo, which is a spirits company. But that was another learning experience for the next 4 years, where I had the opportunity actually to start to practice the whole concept of what I call of leadership being such that you are not necessarily leading from the front, but you're leading from the back. And the whole philosophy of giving people the freedom to succeed and carry on to take decisions, but you're the hitman. But to say that, okay, let's do different things, let's do things differently, but let's all do them, and you guys do them, and everybody does it. And my leadership is one where I am supposed to create an atmosphere where you have the freedom to succeed.
So literally, you have micro entrepreneurs in front of you, and your job is to nudge them. And they take ownership. And they're the real heroes and sheroes.
Yeah, and the philosophy is that you are a person who's a macro manager, but he's micro informed. You know everything that is to be known about the business because that is the depth of it that but you are not using that to beat people on the head over, but you're watching and making sure that others are taking decisions and you're creating the atmosphere. So you as a leader, and my famous saying that Hindi में है, Urdu में है, that कि सूरज की रोशनी में सितारे नहीं चमकते. If you want stars in your business, don't be the sun. If you are the sun, nobody will shine.
True.
So step back and let the stars shine.
Absolutely.
So it's only then, and it takes a lot for a leader to actually step back and say, okay, hang on, you guys do what you're doing. And that is also one of the philosophies that one has practiced. And I say to young entrepreneurs that whereas you will lead with the idea, you will lead with the charisma, you will lead with the persona, you will lead with all of these things. But the moment you start to work with other people, start to actualize their dreams.
You, at this point in time, we've been hearing about this and his ascent. If I just have to step aside and ask you a question, do you find this trait in so many other people who who have become kind of leaders? Because this, for me, I never knew this term existed. It's called servant leadership. Literally, you invest in your people. For you, they are your customers, and they invest in the real customers. You're actually Have you seen this trait? Let's say at a random, if I index a number to 10, how many such leaders possess this kind of trait? In your experience?
In my experience, very few. But I'm seeing the needle moving. I've seen a lot of change in the last 15 years, consciousness about community and um, realizing that it's not just the balance sheet and the other aspects of whether it is CSR or diversity or ethics, all that playing a role. At least in my experience in the last 15 years, I am seeing the needle.
So you have a section of entrepreneurs who are going into so-called responsible consumption, responsibility
It is.
towards making that impact.
Yes.
Yeah, if I earn 1 rupee, you know what? Apart from my taxes, right? I will give back.
Yeah, it's that small slice of the conscious entrepreneurs or the conscious leaders. I'm not saying it's happening across, but one is seeing the change happening.
And also
there,
it's because
there is a
this-
buzz around it.
Your children now would be in their, 20s and 30s now?
They're
30s.
Late 30s.
Are they
almost
changing us? Did they force the hand to change? I'm talking about the 90s generation, people who consumed from the 80s into the 90s and 2000. Because their thinking was very different. They were born in an era of India which was very, very different. Again, very strong parents, right? Independent thinking. Conversations at home was a dialogue and not necessarily hand-me-down instructions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Am I right?
Yeah.
And do you think they changed us?
To a large extent. I think it's both ways. My experience, and I don't know whether his is different, I think because we are professionals and both of us work and our children are also both are MBAs, by the way, that they also are in, working in pretty senior positions. We learn from each other. It's an almost like an equal thing, but we learn as much from them as they listen to us. They don't rubbish what we are saying. They
And
listen.
neither do you.
Not at all. We dare not.
We dare not.
No, even when they were young. So if
Yeah,
they had
even
an
when they-
opinion,
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
would value that.
Absolutely.
So the same philosophy prevailed in the Singh household.
Yeah.
It was that everybody was an individual and you had the freedom to succeed. And we worked towards that to make sure she had the freedom, I had the freedom, the
But
children had the
just
freedom.
I need to interject. Again, I'm trying to see a pattern over here. Here, what you had as a family dynamic in terms of children, they were kind of growing up again. There were no hand-me-down instruction. Everything was a discussion even at home.
Yeah.
Is the same personality at work as well, right? You can't be a
Yeah,
different
it
personality
is.
at
It
work,
is essentially
right?
that, because if there's one fault people find with me to say that you're over delegated and that you indulge in too much of collective decision making or consultative decision making, which is the new term that we have come out with. And as a result of that, there is probably over democracy in your leadership.
Yeah, but I always kind of say one thing, and this is my life experience, Amar, is people who usually look up to you will talk about all these things, but people who are perhaps, let's say, who are far more successful will look at you and say, you know what you're doing is the right thing. So there's too much of cynicism brewing at this level, and there is only respect brewing at this level.
Yeah, but then you see, the thing is, there has got to be a way, and if that way is one which you believe in, it will have strength. If it is something that is imposed on you, then you will not have the conviction to do these things, right? And when we talk about Sri Lanka,
But this is after Diageo,
Yeah,
right? Now you talk about
that
this
was
complete stint of yours.
Oh gosh, that was a
How
huge
was it?
change. It was a huge change. And when I left Diageo, I was managing director.
Yeah.
And then I became zero. I became an entrepreneur.
Again.
Yeah. And that was a phenomenal transformation. And that is where I think Gagan's role in our lives became, from a situation where I was at the principal earner, she became the principal earner. She became the driving force. I became the weak person who was insecure, because I could not. It took me time to reconcile myself to the life of an entrepreneur. Anybody who understands this needs to understand that probably the biggest change that can take place in a person's life, working life, is when you are in the corporate world and you decide to become an entrepreneur. The two are absolutely different, and they call for different strengths within you, which I discovered, some of which I did not have. The insecurities jump up exponentially because you don't have somewhere to go where your salary is coming, and none of us belong to those families where we have 14 houses and
Or you have
25
this large
we don't have-
exorbitant corpus lying somewhere.
As I say, we are like we are like jet engines, you know. We have to keep on fueling ourselves.
Let's just
So-
kind of feel that you spoke about this insecurity. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
huge.
literally zero. You said.
Yeah,
right?
you go off people's
Why?
lists.
Why? What's
Because-
happening?
What's happening is that money, right? You were earning some serious number, right? And now it's zero. You've invested your savings in one restaurant. That's what you've done. And that's it. And from a fancy limousine, you're down to a second-hand car, and you are working out of one little room in your home. Mercifully, that one we owned, and that's it. You go off people's social lists. You go off the Christmas cards. Stop coming. You're no longer invited to various panels and discussions. Nothing. You suddenly feel, and you're from 200 people who knew you, you're down to about, those are the ones, down to 8-10 people who are really your friends and people who know you and believe in you. And then you're on your own.
But here you had good 25 to 30 years of experience as a leader, right? And then this transition as an entrepreneur. But you had your own life experience as well, right? Despite that, you thought, of course, you went through all this.
Yeah.
Why this transition? I'm just trying to figure that out.
To an extent, it was forced upon me. And to an extent, I thought that was also a choice that I had to make again. That I had enough, and I had disagreements, and I had issues within the corporate world that I was working in. And I realized that this was
you
not...
wanted to make something of your own now.
Yeah,
right?
that it was time that I had to move on again.
Yeah.
And I had to take that decision. To some extent, it was forced upon me, and to some extent, I took it upon
And
myself.
could you have taken that decision is because, again, of course, as she was
Oh,
the
yes,
primary
yes.
owner at
Yeah,
that time.
yeah.
But the kind of lady that she is, that stoic, iron lady again.
The family rose to be a huge source of strength, starting with her. And the fact that there was food on the table was a major comfort. So the roles reversed, you know. She became the principal bread earner in terms of the corporate job that she had. And I was the one who was, you know, sort of scratching around and trying to see how we could
when I
be...
look at the behavior, right, Amar and Gagan, I'm looking, stepping back and seeing an outside view. Now, what the children are looking at you, and just imagine what they're learning from this. It's beautiful. If I had to put it into some kind of a cuisine language, it's exotic, right? Here you are, that iron lady. Here you are at your helm, stepping back. You know what? I don't want to be a slave to anyone's grind. I want to be the slave to my own grind. I don't mind starting afresh. You taking that mantle of say, go ahead, right? Everything's going to be okay. You're going to have your highs and lows. The children are there, right? We will continue to ensure that they're educated well and they go. That's what's happening.
Yeah, but it was a crazy phase. You want to put it in culinary language, I will. I'm very fond of prawns. I stopped eating prawns. Because I felt it was too expensive. And the first time in my life, I used to look at the right side of a menu in terms of the prices. And the first people who noticed this were the two girls. And I always get emotional when I tell about this, but there was a time when we went out for dinner and the elder one said to me, he says, Dad, today you are ordering prawns.
You're ordering prawns. Excellent.
I remember we went to your dad, but you're doing it, okay?
Yeah.
And nothing's going to happen. And can you imagine the kind of insecurity you have?
But yeah, I understand the insecurity. But here you are still that resilient man who went through.
Yeah, of course. So where
does his resilience come from?
So again, back to square one. You invest in yourself. We went down into the business and learned every nut and bolt about it. And that gave you the strength. And you went back to the philosophies to say, if this, I have now understood it. I know what it takes. I have put my life savings behind this. And therefore you get the guts and the gumptions.
Did at any given time when you became an entrepreneur, was there a plan B?
No.
I love it.
Honestly, I didn't have one.
I love it.
I tried a few things and didn't work. And that's what added to my insecurity.
But
I had no
this
plan
pattern across with entrepreneurs who have gone in, right? They said, you know what? It's all in or nothing at all.
Yeah, I had sunk all
I'm
my
ready to
savings.
face bankruptcy. I don't care.
I had put my entire provident fund and gratuity into one Pizza Hut.
Tell us the story. How did
So I mean, she was a huge story because she was also part of that transition.
from one Pizza Hut to 3,000 employees, what really happened?
Yeah, so it's crazy. I mean, what one did, we had two stores and we bid for the Sri Lankan business because I had a very benevolent friend who was the managing director of Pizza Hut at that time, and he said, Amar, you are the one who can do this. The Sri Lankan business is up for takes. They've got 17 stores they want to sell out. And it was owned in those days by the Tatas, the equivalent of Tatas, the John Keel's group. And I remember meeting the chairman. Gagan was with me. Our daughter was with me. We met him on the side rooms of the World Economic Forum conference of which he had come. And he looked at me and he said, so you want to bid for our business? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, how many stores do you have? I said, 2.
And here you were bidding for a 17-store business.
Yeah, okay. And he said, so you put the wherewithal? So I said, we shall find it. And he asked me one question, which is, and I said, so, and in later on conversations, he said, so what would you do with our people? Because it's all Sri Lankans who are employed in the business.
And I'm assuming there are 10 people per store?
25.
25 per store?
So I said, sir, I will be the only expatriate.
I love that.
And he said, and I said, I guarantee you that no one will lose their job. So he said, can you assure me about that? I said, I absolutely assure you. And I had to make sure that happens. I'm suggesting that you actually do not sell the entire company. You sell only 75% and keep 25% and put a director on our board. And he said, that's an idea. Okay. Frankly, we didn't have the money also at that time. So I didn't have the money.
But the 75% was in equity?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
So we didn't have the money. So I went around and some friends had faith in me and they invested. That's what happened. We didn't have the money. So, and later on, we were not the highest bid. And I got news from them to say that because of what you said about the people and your philosophy
and the person that you are,
we are giving you the business.
Love it.
We were not the highest bidders. And we got that 17-store business, and there began the next final phase before I retired. It was the whole thing about this transition, the lack of money, and how to grow. Hundreds of people working for you, which have become thousands now. The recreation of that business. And that was the place where I finally got the chance to practice the philosophies that I have believed in people on the front page.
So tell me something again, and either of you can answer. Looking back at that 40 years, from a chartered accountant to your early years, to Salty, to coming back in India, distribution, rural marketing, getting into a QSR at a time, right, where Indian was on the ascent, I would say. How important is education? Or is it life experience? Or is it that grind? Where does education play, if at all it plays a part?
It does.
And I'm talking about higher education, I'm not talking about foundational education.
Higher education is important.
Why?
Higher education is important because it fulfills the gap that you may have because of your primary education. I'm a chartered accountant. I need to understand the nuances of business. I could read it from the end of a book, but that's not what it is, right? So I think business school education is very important. I think it is very critical that we have higher education. But I also believe that it must be grounded in one's personal experience to make sure that what we learn from there, we practice in our own way, in our own culture, and not simply copy-paste. That's the worst thing one can do. Because what happens with higher education is, especially the ones that we gain in the West, is that it seems to give to you a fantastic solution to your problem. The 5 ways of doing this and the 4 ways of doing that and the 3 things that you need to do. You come back chuffed to say, oh boy, I've got it. I mean, I have learned, I know exactly how to crack this, when you haven't learned how to crack it, because then you realize that, hang on a minute, but this is not applying.
Because application and ownership and
that's the whole thing. So therefore, what one...
it's a good foundation.
All entrepreneurs, all people who are trying to see, they have to... my suggestion and advice in terms of the hindsight is that use education and higher education to gain the knowledge where you need to gain it, but then use it with your own wisdom and experience and the culture in which you have to work, to evolve a philosophy which is yours.
Which is yours. Truly, intrinsically, inherently.
Like I had people on the front page, have a philosophy of your own. Have a thinking or something that you own, because unless you have complete faith and ownership of the philosophy of your business, you will have a less chance to succeed.
Is it difficult to do business in India?
Very.
Why do you say that?
Because of the diversity, B, the regulatory environment, and C, the fact that, honestly speaking, there is not enough research available, there is not enough education available on work in the country. Till 5 years ago or 7 years ago, most of our case studies we studied in business school were Western. It is only now that some case studies have emerged, which we are using, which have been created in the country for the country. So there is also lack of grounded education. And if you have to succeed in India, I would say that it is very critical that you know the grassroots realities of the country. That is critical.
And in hindsight, Gagan, tell me, of course, there is an MBA, but when I look at 30, 40 years, it's pretty much learning after every 2 or 3 years, right? We say the world is changing every 2 years. I think the world has been changing, evolving continuously. That lifelong learning, touch upon that, because I am a firm believer, because I'm a very curious mind myself, right? So someone asked me the other day, what is it that you're reading? I said, depending on that particular day, what problem I'm trying to solve. You know? And suddenly you peel that problem and say, oh, I didn't know so much about it, so let me start doing my own. And there's so much of material out there, people's experiences, right? Which you try to do it. You're saying, do I finish a book? I said till about 70% because another problem comes up.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to solve that problem, and I say, okay, there's so much I don't know about it, right? So that lifelong learning, how important you think it is?
It's very, very important. And apart from books, I think constantly learning from people around you, regardless of their status or their education. We can't say because we've got a professional degree that those who don't have it don't know anything, because they can be smarter than us.
Yeah.
So the thing is to be constantly learning, and maybe sit back at the end of a day and say, what are the new things I learned today? Because the truth is, there's not a day that one doesn't learn anything. You have to accept it and be open and love change. I think that's very, very important for a leader. And we would be dinosaurs at this age and not be involved anywhere if we had not changed constantly and embraced change as something we welcome.
So true.
Now, you're also working with the NGO,
Yes.
right? Talk to us about that.
Social causes have been with me since my Leo Club days, since I was in
Right.
college. I've always, like theatre, social causes have been part of my life all through, whether in Nepal or here or before I got married. So this is Salam Balak Trust. I've been involved for 25 years, ever since we came from Nepal. And we work with street children. It's a largish organization. We employ 300 people. And we, as trustees, convene or meet with our leaders every Saturday, whoever can, because everyone has their own personal careers. This is not our day job. It's something we do as an additional thing. The children that we cater to are children who are on the street, who have either run away or been abandoned or have been discarded. And each case is different, and you learn so much from it. But our aim is to mainstream these children, equip them with life skills, with the support on mental health for the trauma they've been through, provide them the education they're capable of taking at that time, give them vocational training, take care of their medical sicknesses, because parents abandon children who are very sick also, because they can't see them suffering and they can't afford it. So they're all different types of cases, but that has been an amazing journey for me, and how much it has made me learn and get grounded and appreciate things in life has been
Because
tremendous.
you see the other extreme, right?
Yes, you see the other
Do you ever question that, Gagan? consciously that, here you have people who have roti, kapda, makan, makhan, and survival. Right? Do you question that?
I don't, because that's the reality of life. And many people are scared of interacting with this other part of life because they find it depressing. It's not depressing. They are happy children. You have to go and spend time with them to understand it. And they have hope. So you're doing your bit by giving them that pathway, doing what it is for them. And that is what is so enriching.
My childhood story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fascinating, actually.
It is. At some stage, we were in the Chawl system in Mumbai, right, for about 3 or 4 years, right? You know how it is.
Yeah, God.
When obviously, as an outsider, when you get into the Chawl system, it hits you.
Shocking.
It hits you, right? You're not used to it. But I can tell you the best for childhood years I had there.
Community living.
Everyone was super happy. And if I look, when I go to Bombay and I pass, and it's all over the place, they celebrate all festivals.
Yeah.
They are in each other's house. Yes. That community we spoke about.
Community.
They are their own health community. They are their own finance community. They are micro lenders to each other, right? And they are
That's the real India.
happy. They sleep with each other on the terrace. At least the boys would sleep on one side. And they have the best time. I had the best. I didn't know these guys are super, super happy. Absolutely. The only thing they don't have is cash.
That's right.
Rest, they are abundant in everything else.
And they have dreams, they have
And they have
aspirations.
dreams. Oh, yeah. So, right.
You just have to provide that one helping hand and do it for yourself, not for them.
Amar, golfer, shairi, lot of passion in giving back. You're doing a lot of teachings, and I believe the people who are shiers, right? It comes from that emotional aspect of things, and it turns into a poetry.
It does.
Right?
It does.
So, how did the shairi thing come about? And
essentially, my father. He was a scholar in his own rights. He introduced me to Urdu poetry, and the whole concept of philosophy. He read a lot of philosophy himself, and I learned from him, and then he actually, again, as a mentor, he taught me. He took me to mushairas. He took me to musical performances. He taught me how to drink in a bar, and all of those things, and he. So I learned from my early days. The whole concept of Indian classical music and and shairi, and then I started writing myself. I wrote in English and I wrote in Urdu, which is another beautiful language. And so I started composing. I started writing. I started writing in school, actually, and so that's how it was, and that's how it emerged. And it's important. This is a quick point that I want to make, that in life, if one has to be, if I may call myself for a minute, a leader of sorts, one's persona and personality has to have width.
True.
If you are, it takes more than that. It just is not just about excellence at your work. It's not the 9 to 6. It is what you do from 6 to 9 on your Saturdays and Sundays. So we have to have other pursuits, because these other pursuits, whether it is theatre, whether it is shairi, whether it is travel, whether it is various other things, reading, it enriches your personality, and you realize that actually when you're acting on stage, you're learning so much from that experience, which actually helps you at work.
So right.
And so it's both ways.
Yeah.
So shairi was something that of course is a relief. I love to compose, and it gives me immense joy. And I think it has, and the whole process of sensitive thinking, of philosophizing and thinking about life, and reading those poets and understanding them, enriches your personality. Great deal.
Well, okay, India went through those traumatic 2 years of COVID, right? Some of us lost people who we knew.
Oh, yeah.
Right? When you're looking at now this renewed innings of yours, I would say the fourth inning. and when I say the fourth inning is, the first was the chartered accountancy, right? Then there was early years, you came back, business, but lastly setting up that business, huge employment opportunities for people. What's your mind space? What is your mind space? What is your mind space in terms of what you need to do now? Let's say for the next
You go
5-7 years.
first.
I understand the NGO. That's happening, right? And I'm sure you'll intensify further efforts in that. But
That's a
where are you at today and 5 years from now?
Well, I have to keep busy, otherwise I'll die. So I consult currently, and I'm on a couple of boards. But going forward, whatever work I do, I'd like to work in the area of corporate social responsibility, diversity, ethics. That's my area of passion for the last 8-10 years, and that's what I'm doing even now. I'll carry on. My aim is to add value and touch lives. That's what I'd like to do, and I'll do anything that comes my way, and as long as my brain is active.
Yeah, sure. And because you're doing that, right, the brain will be active, let's say, in whatever you kind of do. What about you?
No, so I was so mortally scared of retirement, honestly. But again, it was a decision that I took 1 year ago that I would. And as the date approached, my fears started to reappear. So now, what the heck? What are we going to do? But I had made up my mind that this was another phase that I had to get into, and one had been doing that for a while. Well, but once I've crossed the line, it's serious fun. Yeah, it is, and I'm enjoying myself. And I wondered sometimes why the heck didn't I do this maybe a couple of years before, but I think the important thing for me now, and as I'm rediscovering myself, and this is just 3-4 months that I have been have retired. So the from operating responsibilities, couple of things I decided I would not do. I would not, get into the corporate boardroom again, because I find that to be perhaps not a place I would enjoy myself. So I said, let's get down back to the grassroots level, and therefore my first love is coming back is this whole thing about teaching.
Giving back.
I've developed 3 or 4 lectures. Where I talk about strategy, about culture, about operating excellence and stuff like that. So I mean, I want to use every opportunity where I can mentor, where I can talk to students, young people, and teach them and talk to them and help them with the experience that I have had, so that we can all learn together. And every time I enter a room where there are young people sitting, I also learn a lot from them. So that keeps me in touch with the younger people, whereas boardrooms don't. And also I learn a lot from them, and we create an atmosphere where experiences and all aspects are shared. And I'm trying my best to bring my own life's experiences to the discussion room, so that, because that's the most authentic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the biggest thing, of course, is the philosophy of people on the front page, which I think over the next 10 to 15 years is going to be the secret to success, at least in this part of the world. And the West is also now running around with it. So that's it. So it's teaching, it's mentoring, it's working with young people to help them to understand the environment, and to strengthen them. The famous couplet from Iqbal comes to mind, who's a very inspiring poet. Khudi ko kar buland itna कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रज़ा क्या है. That means you strengthen yourself so much that before every stroke of fate, or God himself turns around and asks you, okay, what the heck do you want?
Yeah.
So it's important that these youngsters strengthen themselves, and that's what I would like to help them with.
Yeah.
Plus play golf.
Plus play golf. Plus play
And
golf.
theatre.
You know,
And theatre.
I tried. See, when you grow up poor in Bombay, golf is just a golf
Oh yeah,
course.
that's
Right? You just look out from the fence, right? So I was,
Which people do.
yeah, very intimidated. I went to play golf about 6 months ago over here in Gurgaon, and I just couldn't do it.
You couldn't do
I just
it.
couldn't do it. I thought I was a mentally very strong person. My flashbacks kind of came and saying, Kunal, you're being an imposter here. You run on the road. You're good at that. You're not meant for this.
I don't belong here.
And I have this huge golf set now in my office.
Oh gosh.
And I played.
No.
I just couldn't get to it. Right? You say, what are you doing? My mind was running faster than perhaps you would hit the ball.
I think you've labeled it.
I've labeled it.
You've labeled
but
it.
I need to channelize.
Yeah, you've labeled it in your mind. Yeah, you've labeled it in your mind.
No, he's been
to be an
asking
elite,
me.
to be something which is elite, which probably is something that you don't feel comfortable about.
Yeah.
But that's another discussion that we can have, because it's a huge teaching experience. In fact, I say this to many CEOs that they should, and they do, that they should play golf
Because again, of
it
the
actually
focus.
is the best exercise in humility that you can find.
Yeah, you're so right. No
Because
matter who
you're playing against yourself.
so right.
You're not, see, when you play tennis, you have an
There's an
opponent,
opponent.
right?
Yeah.
You have an opponent.
So right. Yeah.
When you play cricket, you have an opponent. So what happens when you bowl or you hit a shot also to some extent depends on what the other person is doing.
So right.
In golf, that's not the case. It's your ball, it's your club, it's your shot. And if it goes into unintended places, it's your problem.
True.
So nobody has anything to do with it.
True.
So it is actually, it is true that many, hard-headed, strong CEOs find it very difficult to play golf because they can't just
Because it's an instant mirror. Yeah.
They can't take the humility that it brings in its wake.
That's my learning from this kind of conversation.
It is.
The fact that
So golf is an exercise in humility.
Give it one more shot.
I will after
The
this.
pun is intended.
Yes. Give it one more shot. I love it. I love that.
As I said, the pun is intended. So please, as I said, it's a huge exercise in humility. And if you view it that way, and when you play it, you will realize that that is exactly what it will do to you. Because you're a sensitive person, you're not, and yes, please do not, in my view, I advise this to everybody, please do not play golf to do business.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing you can do to the game. It's been actually misinterpreted. And
It's a networking ground.
yeah, it
playground.
is not.
Yeah.
And honestly, when somebody starts to do that with me, I back off and I don't play with the person again. Golf is you should play it with your buddies. You should have fun. And you should laugh at each other and laugh at the stupid shots and be able to and be able to learn from it. That's the best thing about golf. Networking and all of this is, I think, it's been a complete misinterpretation of this game.
Any which way, I really don't believe in this aspect of networking where you just enter a room where you don't know people. I can't do it personally. Right? I've refrained from doing it all my life. And we have spoken to Amar and Gagan. And the last segment is, of course, we're going to ask Amar and Gagan each other some kind of questions and see, okay, who answers them, but most importantly, who wins the hamper.
And thank you so much for doing this, because you know what? It set both of us thinking about ourselves. We sat last evening and said, what are we going to say? And what are we going to do? We sort of bounced a few ideas amongst each other, and we thought of, okay, because your questions were so insightful. I mean, they were so good, and they were so broad that one had to really put one's thinking cap on and say, okay, what the heck are we going to say now? And because it really, I say this, that I've been through interviews. You're absolutely wonderful at how you put everyone at ease, and how easily you are able to wind your way through 70 years of existence, and yeah, wonderful, really, honestly. But I want to tell you that in terms of investment, for example, in college, I realized that I had to become a more affable and a better person. I literally read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, all these, and the philosophies of Bertrand Russell. Because, again, the question was to invest in yourself, to create the person that you want to be. my sense is, and I say this to entrepreneurs, everybody else, it's not going to happen by accident.
Yeah.
No. You have to sit down and say, this is where I need to improve. These are the things I need to do. Go out there, find it, whether it's got to do with business school education or improving on your personality, learning how to dress, all these things, you need to sit down and say, okay, here's a spreadsheet. Now, these are the things I need to work on. Yeah. And consciously invest in yourself if you want the return from your life in terms of how you want it to be.
And the first question in this segment
This
is to you, Mr. Amar Raj Singh. What's the one thing she does to de-stress?
The one thing she does to de-stress is she watches serials. And she,
some new additions in the family.
Yeah, she reaches out to her grandchildren to manage them.
One. What was her favorite subject in school?
I would say, I think it was mathematics, but I don't know.
It is.
There you go.
There you go.
Because that's the way her brain is. She's very good at mathematics.
Excellent. And I tell that to my daughter, everything. I say, you know what? Do whatever you want. Right? Don't drop math.
Yeah.
Do what, because everything in life is physics and math.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
And chemistry is part of all those things and bio is part of all those things. Name 3 things that are a part of the daily morning ritual.
Oh, the newspaper, BBC, and exercise.
Jesus Christ.
That's the probably thing.
What's the one color Gagan would never wear?
Orange or yellow?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize, but he's taking the hamper.
I am sure he is.
And what's Gagan's favorite cuisine?
South Indian.
Jesus, thank you very much. Sorry, Kunal, Amar has left the building. You can't keep up pace. I'm so sorry.
I cannot.
You just can't.
I cannot.
What's your husband's favorite star of all time?
Actually, I don't know.
Lovely. Excellent.
He
Bollywood
doesn't
star,
watch movie.
Hollywood star.
I think he likes Amitabh Bachchan.
Okay. Yes.
Rishnadan tumhare baap.
But,
What's the one thing he does to de-stress?
write poetry.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
1-0,
but
Yeah.
first one was wrong. Can you name the last book you read?
Short, 10-minute short plays.
Yes.
10-minute short plays?
Yeah.
Excellent. What
That
was
was a
his
good
favorite subject in school?
English. No.
Not really.
No.
But,
He's one.
If there was a mic drop over here,
Which was it?
eventually it became physics. But
Excellent.
Okay, I had no
excellent.
idea.
Name 3 things that are part of his daily morning
But
ritual.
this is so easy.
Oh, that is a workout, the newspaper, and the loo.
Yes.
Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, the jury is out there.
Yes, he
Right.
wins.
Mr. Amar Raj Singh has won 5-0
Yes,
and you are at about 3-0.
yes.
Right?
I
So,
agree.
the beautiful hamper for Mr. Amar Raj Singh is coming.
I'd said it from the beginning.
Oh,
everyone
that's
can
fine,
lose.
but we had to attempt.
Yeah.
But
Oh my God, this is
literally,
true.
if I look at the
was-
percentile in math, it's 80%. 80
Yeah.
percentile for both of you.
I didn't realize
Which is so good.
You are awesome.
Coming to me.
Eventually, that's his thing, but
That
you
is-
win the hamper.
that is life.
But I can't let a beautiful lady go, and you have your own hamper.
Oh, thank you so
And
much.
thank you so much for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Give me a
Kunal.
nice hug.
Thank you.
That's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Such a wonderful
It's been
experience.
lovely.
Everyone, thank you for watching this particular podcast with Amar and Gagan. Subscribe to our channel, the ISH Talk series with Kunal Vasudeva. I'm your host with the most, the bestest smile. Thank you so much and God bless.